So today at Harvey Bowes, we've had another inquiry for a buy-to-let investor who's looking to invest in a property that has a short lease on it. So this particular property had a lease of 64 years remaining. So whether it's a flat or a house, I'm going to give an example of a couple of different ways in which this deal can work. Now, typically you may see that we flipped over the paper to save paper, so you might see some lines through here. I'll apologise for that in advance, but I want to give you an illustration about a property. Now, the figures themselves don't matter, it's the principle of the deal. So what we're going to look at is, imagine that you had a flat that you could buy for £180,000 and it only had 64 years left on the lease. Now, if this was the case, there's a couple of different strategies that you can use for buying that particular property. Let's say, for example, that you made inquiries through your solicitor or getting permission from the current leaseholder to talk to the freeholder, to the freehold company, and they told you that you could buy the lease for £20,000. I'm just using fictitious sums at this point in time. I think I'll use the green pen for this. That one seems to be a little worn out. So let's say, for example, that they tell you that you can buy the freehold in this example for £20,000. Now, that means that your total purchase price, you may be spending money on a refurb and doing other things, but the fact is you've got a £200,000 purchase price. Well, did you know that with the right lenders on a buy-to-let basis, you can lend 75% or maybe even 80% loan to value, depends on stress test and rental incomes, etc. And you can do it on the 200,000. You actually apply with that as the purchase price and simultaneously complete on the purchase of the property and that lease extension at the same time, borrowing off the higher value on the LTV, meaning you don't have to buy at this level and maybe bridge it because the 64 years is too low, but you can do this on a standard term mortgage. Now, one of the other things that I think is interesting about this is we've talked about 64 years here, and you see with a lot of these properties that have a short lease left, you find that the estate agents advertise them cash buyers only. And to be fair, there are many lenders that say that basically the years remaining on lease, so years remaining, must be a certain amount. Let's say 80 years. So there must be 80 years remaining on the lease at time of purchase. Plenty of lenders have that definition, but there are also lenders that say that actually what we want is years at end of term. Years at end of term of the mortgage actually is, let's say, 60 years. There's plenty of lenders that have that as a choice, and so that is another easy way of funding this. If you can't get the freeholder to extend simultaneously as part of your purchase in this way, what you can do is you could use a lender that says years at the end of term. And if they say 60 years at the end of term, there's also ones that say 50 years. There's even ones that say 35 years at the end of term. And by doing that, you can take a mortgage on that property using one of the lenders that has that criteria. So where you've got 64 years left, a little bit harder to do under those circumstances. But let's say, for example, you go for, because you're a buy-to-let investor and you're going to take an interest-only mortgage, there's no repayment of capital like there would be with a residential buyer doing it on a repayment mortgage. So whether your mortgage, if it's interest only, is 5-year term or a 25-year term, the monthly payment during that interest only period is exactly the same. So you can apply with a 5-year term, for example, or in this case, you'd have to do a 3-year term for a lender with 60. One of the lenders has 50 years left at end of term. For example, you could do a 5-year or 9-year mortgage application with them on an interest-only basis, and you can fund the property from day one using a standard mortgage with this strategy. If you want to find out more about buying leasehold properties and how the best ways of funding them, then please get in touch with one of the team at Harvey Bowes.